Hello, welcome to Let's Talk About Something. I'm your host, Cyrus Waters, and today we have a special guest for this Christmas edition. You see, I have my Christmas clothes on, but today we have my cousin Vincent with his wife Sophia and their son Levi. Welcome to the show. This is going to be a special one because not only do I have family, but I have people closer than family, people, brothers and a sister in Christ. So this is going to be good stuff. How you guys doing?
Good, great.
Yeah, we're doing good.
Mm-hmm.
Staying busy.
Staying quarantined, staying safe.
as much as possible.
As much as possible, right? Yeah. So I'm happy that you guys are on the show because I've got to see you guys just grow as a couple, married and getting having a child and things like that, and I got to see you guys do ministry in your church. Before we get into the questions regarding music and marriage and things like that, I want to hear your guys' testimony. Share how each of you guys came to faith, and then after that we could get into how you guys met each other and got married.
Yeah, I guess I'll start since she has the monster now. So I was kind of raised, I the way I always say it is like I was raised like pseudo Catholic, in that we were raised believing in God and praying before we went to bed, and I had a Bible that I would read every so often. Every now and again we would go to church, but it wasn't really like a major part of our life, and it wasn't really a major part of my life. It was kind of just a thing that I did before going to sleep, and my understanding of salvation at the time and everything was like, well, if you sin, you'll go to hell. And if you ask God for forgiveness, he'll forgive you and you'll go to heaven. And that was my understanding of what salvation was. And so, if I would do something that I would deem bad enough, for me to consider a sin, then I'd say like, okay, God, please forgive me. And then, that was it. And that was pretty much, that was it in terms of my walk with God. And in terms of my relationship with him, it wasn't a relationship. And I can't really pinpoint an exact day that I got saved like a lot of people can. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing that people, like, if people can. I'm also not saying it's a bad thing that I can't. For me, it was kind of just a gradual coming to understanding of what the gospel was and what Christianity really was, in the sense of a relationship with the Father through Jesus. And I had always called myself a Christian and listened to Christian bands and stuff like that, and I went to youth group on Wednesday nights. We started going to church at one point on every Sunday, but then when I was in I think it was high school. Yeah, I was like 15 or 16. Is when I really just dove in deep and jumped in the deep end, and Christ and the things of God became like the center of my life. And I got saved. I gave my life to him, and made that commitment that my life was no longer about what I wanted and just sprinkling prayers in that every now and then. It was entirely about my will for yours. What I want is gone. And more or less, people aren't going to like how this sounds, but it's not about what I want. It's he's Lord, not just Savior. The Bible says, confess Jesus as Lord and you will be saved. And, I can't cling on to the salvation aspect of it without him being my Lord as well. I'm not trying to, get super deep already right from the gate, but yeah, so that like, yeah, I came to that understanding, like, when I was like 15 or 16, and more so later on as I really got discipled and stuff. But that was, when I was 16 is really when like that understanding really came.
Mm-hmm.
And when and like I said, I can't pinpoint an exact day, but it was just kind of a gradual, like, entering into this relationship with God kind of thing.
Yeah, and I remember when we were teenagers, I remember you. I don't remember. I just remember the time period when he saved all of a sudden.
Like,
And
it's kind of shut up about this stuff now.
Yeah, and I remember you shared with me some Christian rap at the time. I remember the Cray. I think Group One Crew. I think that was their name. You remember them?
Oh man, I love them.
Yeah. So and I just remember that, but I never knew how exactly you got saved. I got saved later on in college, but it's not about me right now. But my testimony is similar, where it was like a gradual progression of understanding the true gospel. And I used to think I was a Christian all the time, just because that's how I grew up. That's what I was familiar with and whatever. Right. So, but it's very wonderful to hear that, Vincent. Man, God bless, man. Such a blessing to hear how God transformed you. Sophia, what about you? How did you come to saving faith and believe in the gospel?
Yeah, so for me, it's oh man, it's kind of like where to start, right? Hey, bud. Sorry, he's having like a blast in here because this is Daddy's room. So he's like, this is a studio that he calls Daddy's room. It's his man cave.
I do all my work.
And... Yeah, it's all his goodies are in here. But yeah, so for me, I kind of grew up the same way. Always just like exposed to there being a God, but not knowing him. And my family would go to church maybe on Christmas and Easter to the Catholic Church, and it was always just I always thought that if you were just a good person and that you didn't do these certain things, then you would go to heaven, and that's just how that was the gospel message to me. Mm-hmm. And I remember being in high school, and I had hit this kind of just really rough time where I was struggling with just depression and struggling with a bunch of different things. And I got into kind of this place where I was just partying a lot, kind of just doing that whole scene, and just to try to numb my pain. And in that same period, in that same season, one of my friends, a really good friend of mine, ended up actually attempting to commit suicide. And he was in the hospital, and he had gone without oxygen for about 40 to 45 minutes, ended up in the hospital in the ICU, and I went to go visit him. And while I was there, this man who... You okay?
Saw that one coming. That's why I kept on looking over here. My son was on top of a drum.
He's okay.
I got on, so, but yeah.
Yeah.
You okay, buddy?
Sorry. So where was I? Okay, so I went to the ICU, and while I was there, a man ended up coming in who had never seen before, and my friend's mom had never seen before. And he comes in, and all he says is, "I heard about your son, and I'm here to pray for him." And he was actually my pastor now. And he had just kind of launched the church in Pittsburgh. And so he came in and he prayed for him. And while he was praying, I just felt something I had never felt before. And it just felt like this shifting happened in the room. And at the time, I had no idea what it was and why I felt that way. And now I know it was the presence of God.
Right.
And after that, they invited me to go to the church. And my friend's mom was really persistent and, just inviting me. And I ended up going to that church, and unlike him, I can kind of still pinpoint the day. It was November 16th in 2008 that I gave my life to the Lord, that I finally heard the message of the gospel in what Jesus did for me, and that no matter how much I try to earn it, I could never access heaven without the blood of Christ. And so I accepted Jesus into my heart, and my life has never been the same again. That depression was just completely broken off of me. And I just felt like this freedom that I had never felt before. And yeah, that's kind of like my story. And, just to kind of go back to my friend now is he's still alive, completely miracle of God. According to all brain scans, he was scientifically brain dead. And just every doctor had told the mom, we encourage you to just pull the plug, just let him go now. And they prayed and believed for just the supernatural, and he's alive and well today. So just kind I know it's a kind of crazy testimony, but I ended up getting saved through that. His siblings got saved, one of which is now a pastor. His parents are pastors at our campus in Antioch. So just an entire way that what the enemy meant for evil, God made work out for the good. And so
Amen.
here we are 12 years later.
Praise God. That's a miraculous story right there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, praise God. I'm happy that you guys both know the Lord, both got saved at a young age. Now you guys got married at a young age as well. So tell me about how you guys met. I know it's a long story, but you guys just break it down in a quick summary, like how you guys met, how you got engaged.
Yeah.
I think this story is crazier than mine, actually.
So I'll start with like how we met. So at the time, I wasn't actually going to our church. I was attending a different church at the time, and my mom and my siblings and my stepdad were going to the same church as Sophie, and they had invited me to a church camping trip, and so I had gone. So I had gone to this camping trip, and I met her there. And at the time, I was actually in a relationship, and so I wasn't looking for anything or anything like that. But I did think she was like a cool person, right? And so like we would hang out, and there wasn't really much to it. Like we would just hang out every now and again through the camping trip and stuff. And it wasn't until, because what year was that? That was probably 2012.
I think that was 2011.
I think you're probably right. And so it wasn't until at least a year later, where I had ended the relationship that I was in like the summer of 2012. Yeah, because then that summer is when we had, like a couple months later, is when we had kind of started talking. And it's a trip how we started talking. So sorry, my brain is like all over the place right now, especially with the TV on in the other room.
Levi was watching Spider-Man.
Yes. So we're hearing like a fight scene in the other room.
He'll pop in and out from watching Spider-Man.
I'm curious to know what Spider-Man movie, by the way.
Huh?
What Spider-Man movie? I'm just curious to know.
Oh, he's watching Spider-Verse.
Oh, okay. All right.
That is his absolute favorite Spider-Man movie. It's probably my favorite Spider-Man movie too. But it is getting old now because we watch it at least once every 2 days.
Wow.
Today we watched it twice.
Marvel got Wakanda right here, Black Panther.
Nice. That's sick. But so that summer of 2012, I was no longer in a relationship, and I kind of went through that phase that I think a lot of young Christian men do, which is where they are super hyped on trying to find a good thing, which according to the Bible, we know a man who finds a wife finds a good thing. And so, going through like my mental checklist of like, who would God possibly want me to marry, right? Or who would I possibly want to marry? And eventually kind of just realized like, yo, Vince, like you just need to focus on your relationship with God right now, not even trip off any of that. And so I had like finally like come to the end of my rope, and I just pray. I was like, God, like, in your time, whenever you want it to happen, bring my wife into my life. And like, I'm not going to look, I'm not going to pursue a relationship. I'm just going to pursue you. And, whenever it's your time, like show me who it is that you want me to marry. And literally right when I finished praying that, I saw Sophie's face. And it was a trip because like, again, it was it was a genuine like, God, I'm not trying to look right now. So I wasn't like just trying to concoct this like thing in my head like, I really like this girl, you know? Like she was actually in college at the time in Southern California, and so I didn't even really ever see her very often. Like she was just someone that went to church with me that I would see like over summer every year, and that was it. So it wasn't really like I'm seeing her all the time and I'm talking to her and things like that, you know. Um, and obviously, by that point, I was going to the same church. Um, but so I saw that in prayer, and I was kind of like, okay, well, God, if that's you, confirm it. If it's not, then just get it out of my mind. Couple of weeks later, or like a week or so, something like that, my mom, I just gotten home from work or something, and my mom was like doing laundry, and she stopped me. She was like, "Hey, Mijo, like, hold on, come here and talk to me really quick." And she's like, you know how all the time I'm praying for you guys and your future spouses and stuff like that. And she was like, well, I was praying the other day for your wife, and I saw Sophie, and I was kind of, I kind of just like stopped and I was tripping. I'm like, right, like, wait, what? Because just the other day I was praying and I saw the same thing. And so that was kind of just like the first, like, okay, this just might actually be God. And so little did I know that God was kind of showing stuff to her at the time as well. Because you know, I'm a firm believer that you know, if God is gonna, you know, do something like that, that's gonna dramatically affect two people's lives, like, then, you know, both people better be on the same page. And you know, I've heard whacked out stories where people will say stuff like that, like what I'm saying right now, and they'll say stuff like that to like a married woman. It's like, well, nah, like you're here in a different spirit.
Right.
So for me, meanwhile, on my side of things, so I was, you know, back home from school because at the time I was going to college in Orange County, and I was home for the summer, and you know, just focusing on the Lord, just you know, pursuing Him with everything in me. And I was serving in a worship service, and there are only a few moments that I could actually say that this has ever happened to me, but just an insane just presence of God came over me, and the Lord just said, "You see that man at the altar?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's Vince, right?" And the Lord just said, "That's going to be your husband." And I remember just being like, what in the world am I supposed to do with that, God? Like,
and you're in the middle of
like in the
leading
middle
worship.
of leading worship. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? And so, you know, like that's never, you know, and I'm like, what in the world? And so I went to my pastors, you know, because I truly believe in covering and submitting to your leadership. And I went to my pastors and I said, you know, this is what happened. And they just told me, you know, take it in a prayer, you know, seek God, seek confirmation. And so I began to pray. And about 2 weeks later, you know, and I remember praying this. I said, Lord, I want you to make it billboard obvious to me. Like, I mean, like, just there's nothing that would ever make me question this. And just because I was so terrified of being out of the will of God and out of that covering. And so I, you know, began to pray about it, and then just little things just started happening that were just weird, right? And like just, you know, the phrase that, you know, coincidence is God, you know, choosing to remain anonymous, those kinds of things happening where it was like, this is just really weird. And at the time, his mom was actually a youth leader with me. And we had this kind of whole youth leadership, and we were both part of it. And we were fasting one day and going to outreach. And that day, she had invited me over to the house, and you know, I was fasting that day, and she goes, "Oh, you know, I wanted to talk to you about something. You know, come over. We're gonna have pizza." And I was like, "Oh, I'm fasting today, but I'll still come over." And so I went to her, and she's like, "Oh, that's confirmation to me." And so I went over to her house, and she's like, "So, you know, I just wanted to tell you." You know, I always pray for my kids and their spouses. And, you know, I was praying for Vince the other day, and I saw your face, right? And keep in mind, this is literally like a week after that happened to me in worship service. And I'm just like, you know, just kind of frozen, right? And I told her what happened. And she was like, that's crazy, because I took this same thing to Vince and I told him, And that's what he said, right? And so now, no, so keep in mind, at the time, we had maybe spoken to each other like 3 times. And every time it was just about worship ministry. It wasn't about anything else. I knew nothing about him. And so after all of that happened, our first actual like conversation was, so
well,
God.
no, we had started actually talking a little bit before that.
Really?
Yeah. Like we would like text.
I don't remember.
But like
that part.
we wouldn't have like any deep conversations.
Yeah, it was very like
it was pretty surface level, like, you know, what'd you do today and how's your day going or whatever, stuff like that.
And then so I think it was the first time we talked in person, I think was what it was. I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't really have a lot of in-person conversations.
Yeah, anyway, so what ended up happening was our first like real deal conversation was like the Lord showed me that we're going to get married. And kind of what happened for each of us. And then it was just super funny because there were so many things where it was like, God is hilarious, because things like my whole life, I always joked around, right? With you can ask my friends, everybody, you know, I'd be like, don't worry guys, one day I'm going to marry a Puerto Rican. I'm just telling you right now, he's going to be Puerto Rican. He's going to be like super talented. That's who I'm marrying. Right. And so when I told my friends back at school, you know, like what happened, they were like, no way, like, you know, that, you know, crazy story, right? Kind of wild. And, you know, and I joked around and I was like, and guess what he is, guys? Guess what ethnicity he is? And they're like, he's Puerto Rican. Like, yep, winner, yes. And so we sat down with our pastors after that, and that was on August 16th of 2012. And then on August 16th of 2014, so 2 years later, we got married. And what he was saying was basically after kind of all of that happened, we ended up, you know, not actually courting and getting together until July of 2013. So almost a full year later. And we took that whole, you know, 11 months to just pray, you know, constantly communicating with our leadership, because at the time we were both serving, both leaders at our church. And so we just really just took everything and just submitted it to God, submitted it to, you know, our pastors, and because we wanted to make sure that we did things the right way.
Right.
And you know, we had both done things the not right way. And so we knew, like, no, we got to make sure we do this, you know, God's way. So
And how long was your guys' courtship?
Pretty short.
Yeah.
So
you guys had a lot of praying though, so you know.
Right, yeah. So, and that was kind of our justification, I guess, if you will. Was that like, so we had officially started courting June. July. Okay, I kept on getting that and our son's birthday mixed up. But so we started courting in July of what would that have been? 2012. And then we got engaged that December.
Yeah. Like 6 months later.
Yeah. And then got married the following August. So 2013.
Yeah.
We're getting these years mixed up.
No, you're getting the years mixed up.
I'm getting the years mixed up. July 2013 is when we started courting, and then 2014 is when we got married.
Yeah, there we go.
And so we started courting in July, got engaged in December, and in my head, I'm like, we've already gone like this like over a year getting to know each other and stuff like that. Like, I don't need to think about it anymore.
Wow. So yeah, that's awesome. But you know, what are some of the things that you guys feel like God has been teaching you guys through marriage, through parenting, since you guys been married for about 6.5 years, going on 7 years? Or what are some things that you guys feel like God has taught you guys?
Oh man,
a lot.
Yeah. I feel like, honestly, and I always joke around about this, is that, you know, sometimes we can think we're somewhere, right? Like spiritually, and then find out that we're not. And marriage was how I found out I wasn't. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, we think that, and I know that I went through this because I went through, you know, years of being single and always felt like, oh man, God forgot about me, or, you know, like this is taking so long. And I remember feeling, you know, alone and kind of just going through seasons like that. And for me, what ended up happening was, I thought I was so ready, right? Like, I'm like, the fruit of the spirit, patience, I got that, like love, I got that. Like, I thought and I'm trying to figure out which things I'm like, no, I'm good here. And then I got married and it was like, no, you're not, like, because at that point is when it's, I've heard it this way, that marriage is kind of like that refining fire that really exposes what's in you, because this is someone who's with you all the time, right? Like, they see the good, the bad, the ugly, and you have to also deal with their good, bad, and ugly. And so I know for me, it's caused me to just grow so much in the fruit of the spirit, like just being able um, to just mold me in the Lord. And so, yeah, it's just, I think just a lot of learning and growing and stretching, but
Yeah.
that's kind of me, but I don't know about him.
There's definitely that, what she was saying, like, it's very revealing of where you're at, because, when it especially tests your ability to forgive, and your ability to, like, pursue peace. And, because, like, if you're like, just like dating someone or just courting someone, there's that aspect of, like, I can just go home to cool off. And, when you're married, there's not. You're sleeping in the same bed tonight. And, like that's one thing, that we've even, like, established. And mind you, this doesn't always work out, particularly if I'm, like, staying up too late and fall asleep on the couch. But
if he's gaming, it this rule goes out the window.
But, like, something that we established right from the gate was, none of us are sleeping on the couch because we're mad. The Bible says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath, like, figure it out before you go to sleep. And so, it really tests that ability. It helps, I think it helps us to take a lot of, like, personal responsibility and really understand, something that we've learned a lot at our church is, like, if you're having an issue with someone, even if you are 95% in the right, and the other person is 95% wrong, you still have your 5% that you can fix. And that's the only thing that I have control over, and it's the only thing that I'm ultimately responsible for.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that, and in terms of parenting, I think one of the biggest things that we've learned is that while we respect advice from other people and even seek out advice from other people, ultimately, like, and this is partially me kind of imparting this to you, but, ultimately, like, how to parent your child the best. And it is your child, and, everyone does things differently. And, so long as, of course, we're not doing stuff sideways from what the Bible has already illustrated for us. But, ultimately, each person knows how to parent their child the best. Each person knows their child the best. So that's been something I think pretty big that we've learned. And, like, there are certain times where, like, we might feel like we're terrible parents because, like, oh, this person does such and such for their kid and we don't, and stuff like that. And it's like, well, the kid's doing fine. Like, he's happy, he's healthy. And, that's that's all I can ask for.
Yeah.
I think for me, as far as with the parenting side, I totally forgot about that part of the question, but for me, it really taught me, and is still teaching me, really the love of the Father. It's crazy how God will use you becoming a parent for you to get the heart of a parent, right? And I've learned just kind of his heart in a whole new way because I know mine for my son.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's so many moments and so many things that that God has spoken to me through in being a parent, and like when I take things away from him that are not good for him, that he wants, and I'm like, how many times do I look like that to God, where I'm like, no, like, I want this. And God's like, no, I know what's good and bad for you. And this is not something good for you, so yeah, just so many moments that I've just am so grateful for. And yeah, it's amazing how you expect that you're going to teach them, but they actually end up teaching you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the amazing things about marriage and parenting is that you learn a lot of spiritual truths even more through that experience, which is a blessing, and it's very humbling too. You know, it's one of the blessings of marriage and parenting is that it's sanctifying. You know, so
oh yeah.
So you guys both do ministry together. I know you guys, you know, both did youth ministry. Primarily, you guys are ministers through music, right? What?
It's kind of equal parts, I'd say, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Well, in terms of time commitment,
yeah, it's kind of equal. yeah. So youth ministry and worship.
What instruments do you guys play?
I'll go first because my list is a lot shorter. So I play guitar, and am picking up or trying to pick up piano. But I can also kind of very beginner level play bass. So that's about it. That's like the extent. But my primary is guitar.
And she can sing.
Oh, yeah.
What's the instrument too? Yeah.
So my first instrument was guitar. And so that's kind of always been like my main one. Although that takes up probably one of the least amount of my time next to bass right now. But so I play guitar, bass, drums, keyboard, ukulele, and percussion instruments.
Wow. all around musician. That's awesome.
I tend to joke that at our church I'm the designated whatever we don't have player. So like if we have a drummer and a guitar player but we don't have a bass player, then okay, I'm gonna play bass. Or you know, right now we're in the situation where on a worship team, you know, she plays guitar and I play drums. We don't have a keyboard player, so I have the keyboard set up next to the drum set, so I can play the keys whenever I need to for that. So yeah.
That's good. As worship leaders, as musicians, why do you guys think it is important for Christians to worship God through music, through singing? I mean, it's commanded throughout Scripture. I mean, think about the Psalms. You know, sing to the Lord. Ephesians 5, I think 19. You know, what I'm saying, sing hymns, psalms to one another. Colossians talks about that as well. You know, what role does music and singing have in the life of a Christian?
You want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's such a good question, and I can tell you, I've been asked a lot of questions about worship, and nobody's ever asked that. So obviously, you know, not only does the Bible command us to, right? But I think there's also a reason and a purpose, right? Well, first, we know that worship happens in heaven. And so it's the one time where on earth we can do what they're doing in heaven, which is an incredible thing to think about, right? That my prayer is always that we join in heaven's anthem as they cry out to God, you know? And not only that, you know, the Bible promises us that when we worship him, when we praise it, and he's inhabited in the praises of his people, right? And so it's a time where we get to connect with the Lord, and we get to just I think the other thing too is it's a moment where we get to declare our faith, right? Sometimes we're not feeling like what we're singing, but in the confession, right, there's life and death in the power of the tongue, and when we confess these things out loud, you feel it, that shifting, right? Like things just are broken and loosened, right? You know, and in where his spirit is, there's freedom. And when we praise and his spirit is, you know, inhabited in that place, it allows for things to break off, you know. And there's just so many benefits to the believer in you know, praising and worshiping God. I can tell you in my own daily, you know, walk with the Lord, there's always a time of worship and just time of being intimate with the Lord through songs. And you know, like I said, sometimes I'm not feeling like what I'm singing, but I can feel like this shift happen when I begin to declare those things and speak them into my atmosphere, and begin to fix my eyes on God and allow everything else to just fade away, you know? But I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I think, you know, and she had mentioned it earlier, a huge part of it for me is that's the one part of the service aside from giving where we're giving something to him as opposed to him giving to us. And I think a lot of believers get that backwards in terms of worship. And I think even like in terms of like lyrically and stuff like that, I think we have a lot of me focused worship songs.
Yeah.
And not that none of them have a place. And I think we can get to this later more, because I think it might have been one of the other questions. But like in terms of like entertainment and stuff like that. So it's like, it's not that those types of songs don't have a role, but like if the song is all about me and all about, you know, God do this for me, then it's not inherently worship, because I'm not giving anything of myself to him. I'm making requests, which of course has a place. You know, pray. You know, the Bible even talks about, you know, pray without ceasing and make supplications. Like, you know, we're supposed to make requests.
Right.
And I think even in worship, in a worship service, that can take place, but definitionally, praise and worship is us giving to him. And I think, you know, for that reason alone, aside from even what you were saying, like it's commanded, so that's a reason enough. But you know, it should not be optional for the believer to miss that portion of a worship service if they're attending a service, you know.
Right.
That's the that's the easiest portion of the service to miss. Like, oh, I'll just get for the word because I just want to get my word. It's like, well, you know, it's not about you. That, like, you know, at least the is particularly the worship service part of it, you know. It's all about him, and it's all about us setting our heart in the place that is ready to receive from him, because we've just given him, we've just emptied ourselves up, and now he has something that he can actually pour into.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's some good stuff you guys stated. I mean, Sophia, I feel you. Sometimes when I'm, you know, sometimes I don't feel like worshiping, you know, praise, singing, and things like that. But like you said, if you just do it, you know, something happens. That's how you feel your spirit. You know what I'm saying? That's how you know, get encouragement, and you're giving yourself to the Lord. You're singing to him. You're praising him. And when you're in that type of, I guess, flow, you know, it really just, you know, shifts your mindset, your mentality, and it just brings a lot of joy. And I love how you talk about how we sing and worship to the Lord is very parallel to what it's going to be like in heaven. That's amazing, because you know what, there's not going to be no more preaching in heaven. You know, there's going to be no more evangelism and things. We're going to be singing, we're going to be worshiping, we're going to be playing music, you know, dancing even, you know, so we're going to have joy. So I love that. And Vincent, I want to piggyback what you talked about. You talked about the content of music, how it is to be exalting Christ. It is to be Christ-centered, you know, not necessarily man-centered. So I kind of want to ask this question. I don't know if you guys do you guys write your own music as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you guys, what are some cautions that, you know, gospel or praise writers should have when they're writing music? I assume it's probably a very difficult task. I assume it has to be tethered with prayer, because you want to be careful with what you're saying, whether it's theology, whether the focus, things like that. So what's your guys' experience on writing your own music? What are some cautions you guys have for other writers, you know, things like that?
Yeah. I think to start, you know, one thing would be for them to have an understanding of whether they are trying to write worship music, like congregational worship music, or if they are trying to write something that is more so just a personal song, or even just, you know, entertainment, you know, because I think there is a place for that, you know. The Christian life is not dry, at least it shouldn't be, and if it is, we're doing it wrong. Right. And I think there's a place for us to just have entertainment that is clean. And so now that doesn't mean that if someone writes a certain type of music that they're therefore not allowed to write other types of stuff. Like if someone's a worship artist, oh, well, then that means you're not allowed to just write fun songs. Like that's not what I'm getting at. But I think making it clear what they are writing, especially if they're planning on like producing it and selling it and stuff like that, or marketing themselves, I think they need to be honest about what type of content they're trying to write. I'll list off a few like artists right now. Like if we look at, some of the, people that we might hear worship from, let's say we're looking at, I don't know, Fred Hammond or Jesus Culture, Hillsong. These are all congregational worship artists. They're writing stuff for churches to sing together. Whereas, let's say if we look at something like Lauren Daigle, or even some stuff from like Carrie Job and stuff like that, or Mandisa, stuff like that, where it's not necessarily stuff that's intended to be sung at church because it's not necessarily inherently worship. Now, it might be edifying, and it might be edifying to the body, and there could even be a place for that in a service, like maybe as a special, like before a message or something like that, or even at the end. But it's not a congregational worship song. And I think we need to know the difference. And like, if someone's like a worship leader and they're watching this right now, I would challenge you to, don't put a song on a set just because you like the song. Look at the words and ask yourself, is this something I want my church to be singing? Because ultimately when we're singing these things, we're declaring them. And if we're saying certain things like about ourselves, maybe in a song, I don't necessarily want to be, I'm not trying to have someone sing that congregationally. There's a song that I enjoy called I Am a Stone. And it's by a metal band, but the song is like an acoustic song with like strings and stuff like that. And the words of the chorus are, I am a stone unaffected, rain hell down onto me. I am a stone unaffected, your fool I will not be. And so it's like, those words are great. I think they're super poetic. I think they're riddled with meaning. Yeah. And it's a song that I will listen to, and like if I'm in like a rough place in my life or something like that, and I might want to listen to that so I can relate to it or something like that. I'm not necessarily going to want my church to be singing those words, Yeah. It's not a worship song. Again, maybe I will put that in a portion of a message, if I'm trying to like make a point. But a lot of the stuff that I write is not worship music. It's Christ centered in terms of like the morality, and like I think a lot of people get hung up on terms like Christian artist and stuff like that, when I'm not trying to be a Christian artist. I'm trying to be a Christian who happens to make art. And if I am really a Christian, and I don't mean to sound like, high and mighty or anything, but if Christ is really the center of my life, and if my world and everything I do revolves around him and his principles and biblical morality, I don't need to worry about what I'm writing not being biblical. I'm committed to my wife, and therefore, if I'm writing a song that maybe is even a love song, I'm not going to write something about cheating. I'm not going to write a song about trying to steal someone else's woman. And, I've even seen Christian artists write stuff like that because they're trying to appeal to a younger crowd and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not biblical at all. And so, like I said, if Christ is really the center of my life, then I don't need to worry about whether or not what I'm going to write is going to be biblical enough. What I need to worry about is, one, is this theologically correct, like you were saying, especially if it is trying to be something congregational that I'm wanting people to sing. I don't want people to sing something declaring praises to a God that is not the God of the Bible. Right. But in terms of, and I need to be honest about, am I writing this for art's sake, or am I writing this for people to be worshiping with?
One thing would be to remember that it's not about you, that it's not about being the next Carrie Job or being the next, not focusing on that, and also not comparing your offering. I think sometimes it's easy to, especially when you're just starting to write something and feel like, oh man, this this is not as good, this doesn't even compare to what Hillsong United's putting out. But I mean, like, United and those groups, they have been doing this for decades, and so having grace on yourself to not fall into the comparison, or not try to even compete with someone else, or not falling into those things, and remembering it's not about you. And also, like you said, making sure, for me, one thing that I do is when I write a song, I go through the song, and I look to see, is there anything that could be even misconstrued as not theological, right? Or is this something that, like Vince said, it's important to recognize what you're writing it for, because if it is more like an entertainment thing, like there's certain people like Toby Mac, right, or Torrin Wells, right? I would probably never call a Toby Mac song in the middle of worship, just because it's not meant for that, right? Yeah. It's meant to, like he said, edify, and it's also, just to have a fun time in Christ, right? But so for me, what I look for are songs that are vertical.
Yeah.
It actually, the Lord really has to put it on me to do what I would call a horizontal song, which is basically more about me. I think there's a purpose for those, but 99% of the time, when you see the songs we're doing, it's all about just bringing praise to God and surrendering ourselves to Him, and bringing ourselves as an offering. And so, but I would probably say those would be, what I would recommend to someone who's really trying to, start writing, and also knowing that how your process and how you write is going to look different than everybody else too. So not beating yourself up if it looks different. Sometimes, as crazy as it sounds, I hear songs in my head, and I'll bring it to Vince, and I'll just start singing the melody, and he'll start playing it. And that's sometimes how we write.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't even know the terms, and I'm like, I just hear the drums like choo choo choo, and he's like, just let me do it, but yeah, everybody's different. The Lord speaks to everybody differently, and that's okay,
Yeah, I like how you guys really broke down, the different, ways, I guess, some people could write music, whether it's like for congregational singing, whether it's like more personal, or like for entertainment. There's nothing wrong with Christian entertainment. And I think, I'm sure you guys hear it a lot, but like, Christian music or Christian artists, there's a lot of controversy all the time with music and the content and even the genre. And I kind of want to bring this out. Does genre matter in I guess in a worship setting, in a church setting? You guys kind of answered it though. You guys really pretty much talked about, is this a song that the congregation can be part of? I get this often, and you guys probably get this question sometimes, how about have rap music in the worship service, But my thing is, typically rap music isn't something that's for the congregation to sing. Usually it's just like the MC or the rap.
It would be it would be weird to, and I feel like even if you're going to a rap concert, it would be like, I don't think that everyone in the audience is rapping along with it.
Right.
I feel like that would be weird if I was at a rap show and someone next to me was like doing it along at the same time. Like, I'd probably look at them like, you're crazy. But if it was singing, that's totally normal. Like, accepted, I should say, not normal.
So what role do you think genre plays in worship music, as far as like in the church?
My short answer is none. So that's my short answer. The longer answer is, I think it ultimately depends on who your congregation is, and what what the culture is that you have set at your church, or what if it's a new church, for instance, looking at your congregation, if they have any past with church, or like experience with churches and stuff like that, knowing kind of what the expectation might be, I think a lot of it can have to do even with like demographic and that kind of thing. If I'm at a church that is used to gospel music, then I'm not going to come in doing a contemporary Christian song, because then it's just going to throw everyone. Like, it's going to feel weird, Same thing, vice versa. If I'm going to a church that's used to hymns and stuff like that, sure, we might bring in like some more modern stuff, but like we're gonna try and stay close to that.
Yeah.
But like if I'm going to a church that is used to hymns and stuff like that, I'm not necessarily gonna pull out Israel Houghton. Like that's just gonna be like, what the heck's going on? Like, sure, you have a choir, but like you just had like a guitar solo and like a slap bass and a synth keyboard. Like so I think a lot of it is gonna have to do with what the culture is at any particular church.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of like whether or not like rap and stuff like that would be okay, I think it could be weird if I had a rapper coming up every single week, but I don't think it would be completely wrong to have a rapper coming up. Like, I don't know, if there was a song where it would just fit, you know?
Yeah.
And there was even a song that we had done a while ago for worship. It was a song called Limitless by Planet Shakers, and we had done it years ago. And there's a part where there was a guy who would rap, and we had strongly contemplated having someone coming up and doing it. And I think ultimately the reason we didn't do it is two reasons. It wasn't even like out of the church isn't going to accept that kind of thing. It was kind of just like it ended up not working out, I think. But the reason we started laughing is because Sophie wanted to do the rap.
I was like, I can rap, I'll do it. And he was like, no, you're not a rapper. Stick to singing. Stop it.
But yeah, like I've even heard of churches, or I've even seen, like, I think there's one like in Europe somewhere where like their worship service primarily caters to like bikers and that time. And so like for the worship service, it's like pretty heavy music. Like, you know, borderline like Metallica.
Like thrash metal, heavy metal.
Right. And so it's like, you know, because now again, mind you, it's still not about me. But if I'm trying to reach a certain type of person, then, you know, something might work more. I don't think there's, you know, if we were going to try and say like, oh, well, one certain type of genre is God's chosen genre of music, then we're going to have to go back a couple hundred years because, you know, they were none of the instruments that we play now existed. So
yeah, I would say too, like, you know, what he said is kind of right on it, of just you're there to serve the people. And so whatever is a way to minister to them, use it. You know, like I know when we're doing youth events, the set list that I'm gonna pick is gonna look a lot different than a Sunday morning. Yeah. And the reason is just because I'm trying to meet them where they're at and what causes them to be engaged in worship. Right. And so it's the same thing of like, if I were to go to a more kind of traditional style church where you know, the generation is a little bit older, I'm going to probably pull out hymns, you know, just because that's what they can, that is what allows them to express themselves their best, you know, because they're not distracted. Right. I think that God is a creator, right? We know him as creator. And even with music, I don't think that there's anything where the Lord would reject the offering, you know? And granted, just Levi's singing. Granted, just some things, you know, may resonate more with one crowd than the other. So you want to just think about who it is you're serving.
Yeah,
you know?
That's good. What would you guys say to someone, and I'm guilty of this, okay? But someone who, let's say, you know, that they visited the church, they like the word, they like the people, it's sound, doctrine's good and all that stuff, but they don't want to join because they don't like the music. Like, you know, like they don't like the type of singing or maybe the type of instruments or the genre. You know, it's not their preference. So that's the stumbling block from them joining this solid sound church. Like, what do you guys think of that? I don't know if you guys heard of that.
Dude, no, that's funny that you asked that because we've recently had conversations about this. And I'll be even honest about like me. I like in the past when I was attending another church, at one point there was a church split at the church that I was a part of. We weren't involved in the split or anything like that, like any of the stuff leading up to that. but we ended up going with the break off because the worship team went with them and we liked the music. Ultimately, the church, they ended up reconciling, and so I ended up back at that church again.
Yeah.
But so like I've been there, but now recently we've had conversations about, because like something that, so we're part of a ministry called Praise Chapel, and Praise Chapel was started in Southern California in Maywood, like what, 50 years ago, 40, like 40 something years ago.
It's like 43 years ago.
Yeah.
Like
so it was started in Maywood, like in the hood.
Mm.
And so the founder of Praise Chapel was a guy named Mike Neville, and he came from Oklahoma. He was a white dude with his wife, and they came to Maywood, California, in LA, to take over a church. Like, the pastor at the church was passing the church on to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went to this church, and they're like, okay, well, we're in this area where it's predominantly Latinos in this area. And if we look at the church, it's predominantly Caucasian people. And basically Mike Neville told the church, our church needs to reflect the community that we're a part of. No, obviously he's not saying it's a problem we have white people here. That would be stupid and that would be unbiblical. Mm-hmm. But what he was saying is it is a problem that this crowd is not here. Mm-hmm. And so, long story short, they started reaching the Hispanic community there. Lots of gang members and stuff like that started coming in. With that, some families left and stuff like that. And so recently we were kind of having a conversation about our church, and whether or not our church reflects the demographic of like where we are at. Our Pittsburgh campus, we have a Pittsburgh campus and an Antioch campus. And our Pittsburgh campus is out in like Bay Point. And so we were kind of looking at it like, why doesn't it look necessarily like what we see in the city? I'll let you take it from here because you were the one who kind of Popeyes. Okay.
Oh yeah. So what we had talked about was kind of just like, does our, are we like reaching everyone, right? And kind of the idea of music came up and kind of what you're talking about as far as, do people necessarily like the genre we're doing, right? Or do they have kind of these expectations on what kind of music they should be hearing? And I can't tell if it froze.
It froze, but I hear you guys.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And so, we basically have just been, looking at that and like, I want to make sure that this was caught, was that I say this with all love and not to try to be harsh, but my question and my challenge for a person kind of in that place who's really struggling to say, this is my church home just because of the style of music would be, what are you like? What or who are you worshiping? Mm-hmm. Because the reality is that if you're there to worship God, right? Mm-hmm. And as hard, and I understand where it's like, it could be distracting, right? Or it might like be hard for you to kind of break past it. Mm-hmm. But how much more of a form of worship would it be to say, I'm laying down my opinions and my preferences and what I want to hear, and I'm just going to worship God and give him what I have. And I think sometimes, and I warn the youth all the time, is don't worship an atmosphere, right? Because I see it's teenagers who can get all rowdy at a conference and they're jumping and they're worshiping and they're focused and then they come back from the conference and the style of worship is different and they can't. Yeah, it's just a piano and all of a sudden they're done jumping, they're done shouting and worshiping God, when God never changed. Right. God is the same God in the middle of a 1,000 people amphitheater that he is in a 10 people in a house church.
Right.
And so I think sometimes people can get lost in worshiping the atmosphere, worshiping the style of music, worshiping the musicians, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of worshiping God. Yeah. And granted, like I said, I get that sometimes it can be distracting. Uh-huh. But pressing through that and saying, God, I'm going to worship you anyway. right? And I can tell you, I have been in some of the most powerful worship services that 99% of the time I can hear and catch all the mistakes they're making. But it's still one of the most dynamic moves of God I've ever seen, right? Because God isn't hindered by a genre.
Right.
God isn't restricted by the ability or capability of the musicians, right? But we put God in that box of God can't move outside of contemporary Christian music, or God can't move outside of my preference of music, right? So,
and I think it's twofold. Like I think part of the responsibility lies on the individual to make sure that it's not about myself. And then, like we were even saying earlier, I think the other part of the responsibility also falls on the worship ministry, the worship leader, to kind of like what we were saying earlier, finding songs that are able to reach their congregation. And something that I say a lot is that a worship leader isn't inherently leading someone into worship. I can't grab someone by the hand and walk them into the throne room of God. Like we can't do that. But what I do pray all the time is that we would create an atmosphere that makes it easy for people to worship. And part of that means honing my skill and making it to where, and I don't say this to sound like super like unspiritual or anything, but am I working hard enough on my instrument to where I don't stink that I become a distraction because I don't know how to play the song? But also, am I doing songs that are going to be too distracting to the people? Kind of like I was saying earlier, if a church is used to CCM or contemporary Christian music, if they're used to hearing Jesus Culture or Bethel, and I come in with Kirk Franklin, they're just going to stand there the whole time like,
but I'll be the only one dancing and stuff and praising, you know what I'm saying?
Right. And so it's like, or like if they're used, or even vice versa, if someone's used to more gospel style stuff, and then you come in with Planet Shakers and it's all poppy, like, yo, I just turned on the radio right now, like. So yeah, that's why I say, like, I think it's twofold. I think the worship leader needs to be sensitive to that, and I also think that the individual needs to be mature enough to understand that it's not about me.
Amen.
And like, if I can see these people as family, and if the word is sound, and I can trust my soul with this pastor, then something like the style of music would seem like a petty reason for me to leave.
That's awesome, man. Well, I had an awesome time speaking with you guys, man. This has been a blessing. I know there's been technical difficulties and things like that, but no worries, man. This was an awesome interview. Before we call it a night, though, man, can you guys just present us with the gospel, man, just in case there are hearers who don't know Christ? I know you guys shared the gospel throughout your guys' testimonies that you guys share, but before we leave, just please just share the gospel with us.
I feel like, put simply, and I feel like that's important too, because a lot of times we try to complicate the word, and we try to complicate theology, and certain things can be, and certain things are not going to be understood. But in terms of the gospel, though, it's extremely simple, and I feel like, put in simple terms, man, like us, we humans suck. And we are separated from God because of our sin, and that was not God's original design for us. And ultimately, the method of the gospel and what Jesus did was ultimately to restore us to right connection and right relation with God. And so basically what we're looking at is, man allowed sin to enter mankind, right? Adam sinned, and it entered man. And so right out the gate, we're guilty just because of original sin. And there's no amount of good that we can do to make the wrong right. if I'm guilty of a crime, and if I murdered someone and I stand in front of a judge and say, well, after I killed that person, I did all of these really, really good things. They're not going to say, okay, well, good, your good outweighed your bad, and therefore I'm going to let you off the hook. That person, that would be a crooked judge, And so often what we hear is like, if God is so good, why, and if God is loving, then why would he send people to hell? And the thing is, he doesn't send people to hell. We do it ourselves. And you know, and like I was saying, we say those things like, if God was so loving, then he wouldn't do this. And so my question was, yes, he's a loving father, but he's also a holy judge, and he's a righteous judge. And he would not be a good judge if he just let sin fly on by because, well, I did some good stuff after. Yeah. And so ultimately, you know, I heard it said this way once, and it was just like so perfect. And it's, you know, the entry fee to heaven is perfection, and we're not going to be perfect. And so perfection needed to come in and take our place. Yeah. And we see this parallel between Jesus and Moses, even where Moses, in order to free Israel from Egypt, he had to not only be a Hebrew so he could represent the Hebrews, but he also had to be an Egyptian in order to be able to have an audience with the Pharaoh. And so in the same way, Jesus, in order to redeem mankind, had to become fully man. But in order to have an audience with the Father, he had to be one with the Father. And so and that's why, you know, he was 100% man. He was 100% God. It's not 50-50. He wasn't a demigod. He is God, and he was a man. And so, you know, that's why, you know, he's like the great mediator, you know? And so he paid the price. And ultimately, you know, if someone's listening here, and if you're not in right relationship with God, and if you don't know what would happen to you if you were to die, God forbid, right after watching this, you know, Jesus said the only way to the Father is through me. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. And he paid the price so that we wouldn't have to. But ultimately, it's up to us whether or not we want to cash the check. Like it's already, it's written, it's there, the funds are there. When Jesus said it is finished, it was a legal transaction of him like saying like the debt has been paid. Right. Like, you know, not to get too, you know, deep into theology here or anything like that, but like when you look at the word that he used when he said it is finished, it was a legal term. It wasn't just I'm done. Like he wasn't saying my life is finished. He was saying this transaction has been complete. But like I said, ultimately it's up to me. You know, Christmas is coming along right now. Someone could give me a gift, but it's up to me whether or not I'm going to unwrap it and use it. And they already paid for it. It's there for me to have, but it's up to me whether or not I actually want to accept that and walk in it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brother Vincent. And I know Sophia and Levi are oh, there she goes.
Yeah, I came back.
Yeah.
Levi, I just came back to say bye. Yeah, Levi is being crazy.
This was a blessing, though. Thank you so much for sharing your guys' testimony. I know being transparent like that is kind of difficult. Thanks for sharing your guys' story on how you guys got together, the advice and your experience regarding marriage and parenting. Also with music, I learned a lot of things, man. This was awesome. So thank you so much for your guys' time. And you guys have a Merry Christmas.
Yes. See you too.